Pseudo live, and now we're playing the song Early Birds. Early birds, rise, my early birds. I'm really excited to be here with some of my favorite people. We got Sean, we got Dank Helicopter Aiden, Steve Pinnaker from Mormon Book Review.
Pinnaker.
I love you, bro. I'm glad you're here. It's been a minute. John Henry Mills Warrington. He's no slave of Her Majesty. He is a true free sovereign. I love you, bro. It's good to have you. All right. Early birds get the worms. It's a little late for the East Coasters. Some of you are like, dude, it's noon birds.
Yeah,
like you're
1
getting
o'clock.
Yeah, like whatever. But for
Well,
California, being awake before noon is pretty exciting. I gotta say, I feel pretty cool about myself right now. So
I slept in this morning, so it's early bird for me too. So even I'm in Florida.
Nice.
I mean,
work.
bank hours haven't even started yet in California, right?
Dude, banks in California are just like, and they close the door. Like, you really can't expect much out of a California bank.
I mean, California people time, man.
So I was about to
4 hours behind
up.
everybody else.
There's so many things I wanted to talk about that we're not going to. You know, like I wanted to celebrate diversity in Hillary Clinton's birthday, but really, it's an alien conversation that was starting up already. And we gotta get a plug here because, like, one of my favorite people, more in book reviews, Stephen Pinnaker, he had done a video with a person, Roger Launius. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And he was former chief historian for NASA, and also is I think he's still the historian for the Air and Space Museum for the Smithsonian Institute. So yeah, that's him right there. And he's best known for a biography he wrote of Joseph Smith III, who was the president, prophet, seer, and revelator of the RLDS, which would later become the Community of Christ. So he's a well-regarded historian, and also writes about baseball. He writes about baseball, but also his main area of expertise is about the space program.
Wow.
And NASA. And also, he likes to talk about Roswell. He believes that it was not anything alien; it was everything. It was terrestrial all the way. So it was a fascinating conversation with the guy. You know, the episode was called Roswell.
Can I ask a question really quick? Does he believe it was from the United States or is it foreign?
Yes, he believes it was a Project Mogul. Yeah, good. You know. So there's, because of course there's that theory then that of course it was from Stalin and that they had these midget children or something. And, you know, so I've always been interested in Roswell since I was a kid. I find it to be a fascinating subject. I was a evangelical born again Christian who was also really into a lot of stuff. And then I was an atheist for 13 years. So I basically deconstructed everything from religion to conspiracy theories and everything. And now I've found my way back into faith, but it's just kind of looking at it from different lenses. Like I love the idea that there could be, like I met Grant Hancock in the 1990s with his Face on Mars book and got him to autograph it. And Grant Hancock is a great guy, by the way. But like I've been steeped in this stuff for a very long time. But I would say I'm very much a skeptic of conspiracy theories. And for me, do you know what the day that I abandoned conspiracy theories was? On September 11th, 2001.
Really?
Why? That was the day that I said there are going to be people who are going to say this is an inside job. I know that it's not. I'm walking away from conspiracy theories. Boom. And
why were you so convinced? Like, were you in New York, or like what made you think?
No, it was just one of those switches that turned on for me, because I was aware, you know, Alex Jones, you know, back in the day, the way you watched Alex Jones, people passed along videotapes.
He hated Republicans back then. Oh my God.
What's that?
He was very anti-Republicans
back then.
Oh yeah, that's true. Well, he hated the New World Order. He hated the industrial. Military industrial.
It's funny because it's actually the old world order. Those people have had power for so many hundreds of years at this point, those families.
That's true. And of course, powerful families have ruled in the world, in this country, for a very long time.
The new world order would be to change that, in my opinion.
Yeah. But I would say he was always probably been libertarian leaning. Like, I think he's always been a Ron Paul guy, you know?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that he was.
Wait a second. I want to give context to what I just said. Okay. So it's the New World Order because that's when the mercantile class surpassed the royal class, like 400 years ago, roughly. Like, essentially when they started the Dutch East India Company. And the old world order was the royal families actually having direct political power. And then when that was superseded by essentially corporate power, when the United States was created, that became the New World Order.
Yeah, it's interesting because
we create a third world order if we want, where we kind of, you know, reinvent a new wheel. But God,
yeah, but that 1968 shekel though, right? Nobody, you don't think so? Okay.
I mean, that is kind of wild. Oh wait a
I mean,
second. Where's just the debunk there? So
Yeah, but
like,
the debunk is
there's
not like
something
much of a
challenging
debunk. It's
here.
like the debunk is that it's not actually two towers. It's like a picture of the scrolls.
Yeah, it's
Well,
scrolls. Yeah.
obviously
Yeah, it's
scrolls.
like, which is obvious. Like, you know, what did you expect? Like, right?
I mean,
I mean,
people are
put
gonna
it to you this way:
that-
my grandfather worked on those towers, and he married a Jewish woman. So, I mean, there's probably not a lot of conspiracy, at least as far as that goes.
I don't think that all of the Jewish people like conspiracy theory ever works. You can never just be like, oh, let's blame a nation, let alone like a scattered nation across the world that's making a lot of different choices depending on which day. Like, it's not a physically possible conspiracy to allude to. However, the idea that there have been elite families in all parts of the world from all different races and lives, like we know that there's like maybe 9 families or more that are very powerful and have been very powerful in most continents for the last few centuries. That does play into what you're saying in terms of the mercantile class. And it is what seems to be what's going on right now is the statists versus the corporatists. And statists saying that this is a legitimate source of violence, and the corporatists saying you should be able to choose which corporation you work with, right? Which is positive reciprocity. I mean, who's to say that that's any safer? Because once a corporation is policing itself, sounds great. It sounds like, oh yeah, well, like for efficiency, I should have.
There have been instances where corporations have come into possession of large pieces of military hardware, like aircraft carriers. They usually immediately turn them over to governments in exchange for like their value. But that's happened.
There's laws against.
Not always. So I was thinking about the cola fleet, right? So when Pepsi controlled the world's 6th largest navy, so after the Soviet Union collapsed, and on one hand they were giving them old tankers, but really a bigger deal was that the former Soviets and the Soviets until the Russian Federation were making naval fleet ships just for Pepsi. So they had brand new boats made by the Russian government. And why would Pepsi need nuclear tankers and Kalashnikovs? Well, I'll tell you. Because pirates. There's a lot of pirates out there. And if you're trying to get your boats from one place to another and then someone's taking your ship, it could be a bigger deal than you realize. It's not just
if you have a lot of merchandise moving around, there's no reason why you shouldn't have a private military contracting branch.
People get killed. You know, I mean, like if you're
I'm just saying, like, there's no reason for the people to be on the trade route unless they're moving merchandise, though.
Yeah.
This is true.
Like, they're not on vacation, bro.
Large companies that are just doing heavy industrial agricultural production that are also transporting things. You would probably need these type of large ships
and various weaponry. But also, I wanted to pull back to the interesting thing about your JS the third reviewer or book biographer being so interested in space and NASA, because it's also something. I mean, this is the first Book of Mormon to go to space, right? And I think it's interesting that there's some weird kind of connection there, like this Mormon cosmology idea. And I wonder, do you think spiritually, I mean, also just really quickly, this is something I've noticed, like spiritual people and metaphysicist people and engineering people are not that different. This is our friend Mark SOQUEL from Alt Propulsion. He is a hardcore Hasidic Jew, very conservative Jew, but he believes essentially... Jew? Hardcore Hasidic.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Hasidic. But he's also familiar with some theories, essentially, that he basically believes it's all about aliens. He basically believes it's all about aliens. He thinks the whole Old Testament and the Midrash are talking about Elohim being sort of a Anunnaki-like family. And he thinks the entire religion kind of stems from this idea that we have progenitors and that we're supposed to follow these cosmic laws. I mean, it's his own belief structure, but it's interesting how science and religion, I think, do kind of tie together. And people will say that they're so separate, and really, it seems like they're so tied together.
Oh, yeah. Science and spiritual philosophy have always really been much more deeply linked, especially at the very forefront than most people realize. Like, if you're not involved in it, it might look like a bunch of dry math, and that's it. But if you look, even like to get back to the UFOs and all that and rocketry, the people who were building those things were deeply into the occult, and that was pretty much their entire motivation of like to advance humanity's power. Nobody had ever done anything like that before. Like, if you look into Jack Parsons and what he did for rocketry in the United States and the things he was into in his off time, you'd be amazed. You're muted.
Andre, you're
muted.
Are you guys all familiar with Jack Parsons? Like he's saying,
Yes. He used to
Like they
hang
say,
out,
JPL stands for Jack Parsons Lab, not
Right.
Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
Jack Parsons was, a rocket engineer and a friend of Wernher von Braun. And one of the reasons why the United States got into rocketry at all, he was also really into thelema. He was into occult. And I think that you can see how that is true by his patent of a solid state fuselage, which is still used by Lockheed Martin to this day for all jet propulsion, that is in the shape of his hexagram. He also has a pentagonal.
That's Crowley's hexagram, by the way.
Yeah, look at the Lockheed Martin logo. When they slide the fuel into the fuselage, it's a solid state fuselage in the shape of a pentagram that just sticks in, essentially. This is where that kind of occult tie to engineering is pretty clear, pretty like transparent.
Well, I mean, if you really just think about the entire concept of rocketry, you've got the Earth and gravity saying, hey, stay here. And Jack Parsons is like, no. You know what I mean? Like, that's really do what thou wilt shalt be the whole of the law right there. Like, I'm just going to go straight the fuck up. Fuck everybody else in history.
He's from New York, by the way. He curses like the way they say like in California.
Excuse me.
Oh my God. It's like
It's a synonym for very here.
We let him do it because we don't want to make him not be himself. So,
I'm like Ricky from Trailer Park Boys. If I can't smoke and curse, I'm not myself.
Wasn't Jesus Christ born from a spirit though? He was the spirit moved within the body, I don't know, Mary, and then that was how that's the Immaculate Conception. So I mean, it's sort of like that's what they mean about the spiritual aspect of it, and it's like you also probably a space invader anyway. Whoever impregnated Mary, so like Jesus could be like a Nephilim or something like that,
like a light being. I mean, the idea that if it's because some people take it to a pretty corporeal or terrestrial experience, but the idea, the Catholic experience is really kind of this imbuing of deification in her womb, right? So it's just straight like a laser.
The Catholic official story is that she was also immaculately conceived. She has no earthly father.
Right. So this Immaculate Conception to me sounds a lot like a laser beam through your body, like it's going through you without puncturing you. That's kind of the whole point.
I think it's more in the Catholic way of thinking, though, that there was really no necessarily thing that intervened. It was just kind of the way the universe was ordained that the baby would grow inside of her, because that's what God said would happen at the beginning. I feel like that's most Christianity, actually.
Baby would grow inside of her.
There was somebody that showed up that told her it would happen. There was an angel that showed up to tell her, but as far as the growth, that was what she would do, regardless of whether or not she heard about it or not.
I mean, it's an interesting idea, though, because remote fertilization or radio fertilization, that's not that outside of what science talks about today. I mean, it sounds crazy to talk about that religiously, but when we're talking about seeding life in other worlds, right, the idea is to send a linear, unidirectional radio signal towards a saline solution, which has got crystalline salts that can then vibrate with that radio. And that radio...
Isn't that how the sun made the earth come alive?
This is kind of their,
they just shot a bunch of radio energy at it until it started vibrating. Like, have you ever seen a non-Newtonian fluid on a speaker and it like starts to rise up and dance? That's what I think life really is. It's just the sun's energy doing that in mud.
That's
like that's cymatics, I think it is, isn't it?
Yeah, cymatics, exactly. Like, if you look at it, like, cymatics just generate a pattern based on the frequency that's being played. So, yeah, it makes perfect sense that the sun's frequencies are just doing that in mud. If you look up an animated version of that, the tendrils push upward. They don't. That's not like an inverted picture or anything. It's really wild what they do. They look like they're alive. And essentially, that's what life is. It's taking energy in from a vibrating source, the sun, and it's animating humus, mud from the ground, clay. That's what it says in Genesis. We're all made of clay. I mean, like, what else was there on Earth to work with?
So the sun worked on the clay. Because Jesus made he made references to him being the son or of the sun. I am the light of the world, and
if you actually look at there's two pentagrams in the Greek element system where Well, they're the same pentagram where you have the 5 elements at each one of the points: fire, earth, water, air, and spirit. But you can either put spirit at the top or a spirit at the bottom, and then the pentagram points up or down based on whether you do that. And the idea is that spirit is like motion is either based on the other 5 elements or the other 4 elements. Or the other 4 elements are based on motion. If you look at quantum physics, everything is a pattern of vibration. Nothing is actually a solid thing. Like there's nothing vibrating at the base level. There's just the vibration. So that kind of makes more sense. Yeah, and then like when you start layering other vibrations over that, you get things that look like the physical world where we have spirit encased in matter somehow.
What I find weird about this is like, how weird is it to you that basically the entire world is pretending to be this science-based atheist place, yet every single part of it is run by this sort of occult spiritual intelligentsia, and that they're all kind of worshiping the same God, right? I mean, like today we've got the Israel launching retaliatory strike on Iran, but Christians, Jews, Muslims, we're all talking about the same thing. You know what I mean? Isn't that kind of weird that there's this sort of war where all the people pretend to be atheists, and yet at the top level they're fighting over their nuanced view of this creator that we're talking about?
I don't think they're fighting over their religion. They're using their religion as an excuse to fight. They're just fighting over who has control over what land.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like when you kind of think of like Islam, it's like, my God is greater. That is Allah, Akbar.
But it's the same God.
God is greater than yours.
That's the same God from Christianity and Judaism, and he's saying the same exact thing he says in Christianity and Judaism. There's very little difference.
No, I think these are just, in my general view is they kind of copy the idea of the Jewish thing of, no, your gods aren't really real. Our God is supreme, and we're its chosen people. That's what I think they do. Okay, let's do that with our moon god.
Well, I mean, a lot of the time, if you think about it, like the reason Christians have the rabbit theme in Easter is because there was a group of non-Christians who converted to Christianity who had a rabbit theme in their festival that lined up with Easter. So they just kind of, tweaked Christianity a little bit to bring these people into the fold. So essentially the same thing happened with Islam. It's just a little bit more different from what all the other people who came into the Abrahamic folds were believing at the time. So it's Abrahamic religion with a different culture spin on it. But it's still, there's one God that is the one most high, and that's it. But that's Christianity, Judaism, and even what was the religion that had El in Sumer? I forget the name of it now. Wow. But that was like, I think, the oldest example of having one God.
Most Canaanite religions seem to have the same origin point, right? In this idea that El is Elohim and it's not Eloi. Mm-hmm. So Eloi would be a singular. Elohim is a plural of Eloi. So that means that there's a family,
The Christian Bible has a story about an angel, Abad and Apollyon, visiting someone in a field, and the Greek religion has an almost identical story where it refers to the god Apollo instead. They're almost the same character. Essentially, what the Abrahamic religions said was that, your gods may not be, may exist, but they're really angels, or they exist in some pantheon that was created by this one original God. And if you really make sense, if you really think about it, it's the only thing that makes sense. There has to be one original creator. They can't be two original creators. That's nonsensical.
Well,
I mean, it depends. I think it's funny because some people will say that there's no, like, even I think the King Folly discourse kind of gets this idea that there's intelligences are neither created nor destroyed. So it is this space-time foam of bubbles of intelligences. And I don't know do you see it like that? Or, I mean, also, Stephen, what do you think?
Well, I think Mormonism is so unique because it allows for more of the speculative nature of these types of conversations. I tell people, I was talking to somebody the other day on the phone and said, hey, Mormonism gave us Battlestar Galactica. So, to its credit,
it's done some good.
Yeah. And I'm old school, like the old school original Battlestar Galactica back in the day too. But
shiny.
It does enable, and I've had conversations with people about like remote viewing, like maybe Joseph Smith was remote viewing the plates, that they may have been located somewhere else, but also the idea that there's life on other planets. It allows for more speculative nature of science fiction, whereas within the conventional Christian worldview, it's essentially Christianity, when it was basically a Catholic thing, believed that we were the center of the universe and we were it. And
Locked down, yeah.
Oh, the evidence we
and
had
so-
at the time also supported that belief.
what's that?
The evidence we had at the time, which was very, very, very scarce, we had almost nothing, kind of supported the belief that we were the center of everything. Like if you looked up, it really looked like that.
Certainly.
We could forgive people from antiquity for having those ideas.
Until they start burning people
I
at
don't
the
know.
stake, though.
I
you
think
know?
they still do that. It's a bunch of Israelis thinking they're the shit. Like, oh, our God made us kings. We're ancient kings and shit. You know.
Well, I mean, didn't you just say the same thing about the Arabs and the Christians and everybody else?
Yeah, I know. There is
again
that
with the
general
distinction.
view of everything's about me, 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 me.
I think,
me,
yeah,
me.
it's more
feel
like
like
from an
anybody
isolated
with-
place.
Any country with the military is going to have that predilection, to not compromise their sovereignty.
But sorry, Stephen, I didn't get you cut off.
Well,
there.
just with Christopher Hitchens, he talked about wherever there's this idea of chosenness. If you think you are chosen or there's holy ground, that's where blood is shed. So there's people in Serbia that believe that they have holy ground and they're killing the Croatians over it. And so it's just like this idea that we're a chosen people, we're special, we're set aside. And again, I'm not mocking the Jews or anything like that, but I'm just saying that anytime you think that you are a chosen people or that you have a special piece of real estate here on earth that's God ordained, inevitably is going to lead to war and bloodshed. And and it's not just within the Abrahamic tradition. We can see that throughout the world.
True.
That's going on all over the world for most of history. The only reason that the Israeli-Iranian conflict is particularly interesting from a current events perspective is that Iran is on the cusp of getting nukes. That's why the entire world is watching this thing with bated breath. It has very little to do with the fact that it's a religious conflict. That happens constantly. And there are conflicts that go as deep as religion that just don't happen to deal with spirituality all the time, like you mentioned before, the Serbs and the Croats.
I just think
I'm
it's
like-
interesting. That's also another example that the Serbs and the Croats, like as a Croat, were not that different.
Oh, did
I
I
would
pronounce
love-
it wrong? I apologize.
No, you're fine. I'm just saying, like, and by the way, in high school, people did call me a Croat, and I'll get them for that. But no, if you had
only ever read the words.
if you
I didn't offend you.
if you think about it, though, Yugoslavians, as much as we want to pretend that we're super different from each other, I hope I don't upset my own people saying this. We're actually kind of similar people, right? We come from a very similar religion. We've even ingratiated ourselves to a Serbo-Croatian language before we used to speak Italian in 150 years ago, Roman. So the fact that we have become a unified Slavic people, that's where the nuance leads to further fighting. And I think it's maybe even easier to have differences if you look at two religions that are like, well, we don't have one God, we have billions of gods, and we don't believe in one lifetime in heaven, we have reincarnation. Maybe that much difference is necessary to have peace, because it seems like the religions that are more close are fighting more. They're like, you're too close to us. You should believe exactly what we believe.
There's never been a Christian-Hindu conflict that's gone on for any appreciable amount of time in history.
Familiarity.
Second of all, even when you have that many gods in a religion like Hinduism, you have the three at the top: Brahma, Shiva, and I forget the third one.
Well, let's nuance the Trimurti, but I want to hear what Stephen was saying. He got cut off.
Well, familiarity breeds contempt, and then so like I think the great conflict between the evangelical world and the Mormon world is a perfect example for 200 years of us basically killing each other, persecuting each other, and all that kind of stuff that's been going on. And it's but then we see the similar things with Jews and Christianity, and then with Islam. They're so close. Just the same with Croatia and Serbia. They're basically the same people, but because there's a few differences, they're going to kill each other over it. And I also have to say that, really, when you think about it, the war between Protestantism and Catholicism didn't end until the Good Friday Accords were signed in 1999 in Northern Ireland. So this is something that's still very recent, and now, but I would argue, though, that Christianity has evolved to the point where we don't kill each other over religious differences. And even within the context of, yes, evangelicals and Mormons were killing each other in the 19th century, but we're not killing each other in the 21st century. So I think that there is an evolutionary progress that has happened and a maturity within Christianity that we will no longer use violence to settle our theological differences, which I'm hopeful will continue to be, but who knows?
I hope that's true, but I don't know if I see that, because
because
look at Iraq, Afghanistan, and any circumstance. No, it's not that were killing other kinds of Christians necessarily, but again, with the same God. So when I see someone in the Midwest or something that says, oh, sand people, you know, like there's a treatment of Muslims that is really racist, and even though they share the same God, and a lot of Muslims are pretty great people. Most of the Muslims
So
that
you're
I've
calling
ever interacted with,
Midwesterners that?
really all you Midwesterners out there. No, I'm sorry. I lived in the Midwest for a while, and I thought it was really
Dusty
interesting
over
that they're
there.
not dealing with so in Minnesota they have 5 o'clock Masoret prayer hour now, which for a Lutheran is probably very unnerving at 5 a.m. to hear Arabic being sung in prayer,
No.
right? They're not used to it, right? So I'm seeing that there's like a push together, and not everyone is coming away from that peacefully. There's not everyone just saying, okay, well, we all do share love of God and love of our family, and maybe we do it slightly differently. I do see that there's a little bit more violence than there should be, and a lot more ignorance than there should be, and a lot more hatred for your neighbor than there should be. And it seems to me ironic because particularly in the Midwest, it's interesting because there's a lot of conservatives there. You're not going to find a more conservative person than a Muslim. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're going to find, like if you're going to be, like if it's Red Dawn and you're getting attacked, it's going to be a Muslim guy with you that's going to be sharing bullets, you know, to defend his farm and yours. So it's kind of ironic that people have turned it into this, that there's a dynamic there between the two people that should be getting along as opposed to the hierarchy, which is exploiting both individual, like either family is being exploited by the state, the corporation, etc.
Yeah, the non-spiritual entities in the universe are the ones that are screwing with them the most. So
Well,
the two
I
people
would
that
say it's
believe in
interesting
God
that
the
if you
most
look
in
in
slightly
Michigan,
different
there's
ways are fighting each other.
one of the mayors of one of those cities that's has Muslim majority population endorsed Donald Trump. And also
Exactly.
that they are pretty.
Most of the Muslims I know like Donald Trump.
Yeah,
What's that?
a lot of
the
Muslims we
I
know,
know love Donald Trump.
right? A lot of them are conservative. I mean, it is what it is.
Well, it is like,
Yeah.
you
They don't
you
even
see
touch
that-
alcohol.
Well, you see that mayor, and he does, like, one of his big things is that he was criticizing is that at least Trump acknowledges Israel has way too big of a stranglehold on, Hamas, and that, a lot of the wars, it's like, oh, well, at least Trump was pretty good at minimizing these things happening when they are now going to happen. If, Kamala Harris is happening, millions upon millions are going to die on it. But, I think there is a lot more of a nuance of just, hating that very slimy feeling that you get with, a lot of the slimy thing of, you put us in here politically to be in Michigan to keep it.
There's definitely that's what bothers me. The exploitation of yeah, of course, everyone's being used, and the moving of refugees into a place, and the assumption that a refugee is going to want a social service,
Michigan
and then
has
the
a large
refugees
Muslim population
not wanting those
historically at
social
this
services because they want to be independent and sovereign, and they want to have their own family. It's like the left thinks that creating pets for pet causes will sustain the left, right? That doesn't always work.
A lot of
right?
the not Islamization, but the large importing of Christians, especially from Iraq. I forget what they're called. A lot of them, but of Arab populations into Michigan, which
Coptic
they've never
Christians?
had an historical one from the 1800s or even early 1900s. Has been purely from keeping Rust Belt Democrats, that state being blue. And you could say the same thing with about Minnesota, and it's a little bit more insulting in Minnesota, but both cases, it was used as a political control attempt on both hands. It's very insulting what they did. I don't like it. I think, the big problem of America, especially with boomers, is that they don't have a spine, and they can't just say, no, you're not going to do that. We're not going to take these votes. Fine, fuck it. Let's go to civil war. You'll lose. They don't do that. They have no spine of saying no to any of this stuff.
I'm concerned. I would say it slightly differently, but I like it. I'm concerned that the neoconservative, neoliberal hegemony is so openly allied now that it's like, hey, Dick Cheney and
Yeah, that's
Obama.
really weird.
Let's all hold hands. Like that's a weird thing because then you're basically saying all legacy versus anything new, right? It's
If
the
you
old
remember the
versus
beginning
new.
of Occupy, Bush hate was still cool. So like everybody who I knew was politically active at the time was massively against Bush, Cheney, Halliburton, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To have him standing up on a stage in front of a bunch of people who call themselves politically progressive and
Like it's
acting
like a
somebody, or even
reunion.
putting his daughter up on stage with Kamala Harris on tour is absolutely mind-boggling to me. Like if I
mean,
was
like,
them,
what-
I would put my money into it and hide my face hard because I wouldn't want people to know I was associated with it. I would have
It's like
10 shells
looking at a
between me and the
sitcom.
actual money handover.
It's like a reunion tour of a sitcom we watched as kids, but like the villain and the hero are hugging now because it was all just a
Yeah,
show, and it's like, how are
yeah.
people happy with that? It's weird.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like I don't know. I think Dick Cheney may be on fentanyl right now. I mean, just he would never allow himself to be like this fucking, like he would never do something like this like 10 years ago. Oh, I'm going to endorse Kamala Harris.
It would have broken from his character too much. I feel
No,
like.
I mean
Like
like
that
I
would
mean,
be like
like,
if he endorsed Barack Obama
yeah,
Yes.
I mean it's like it's
when
like
he was
that.
running
And,
against what? Who was Barack running against in 2008?
John
Ron
McCain.
Paul.
McCain.
John
I
McCain.
only count Ron Paul. That's the only one that was really running.
And
Everybody else-
Dick Cheney was one of those guys that his criticisms of Obama and a lot of politicians were legitimate. And Dick Cheney was this like workaholic guy. He actually like when he and right after War on Terror happened, 2002, he spent 80 to 100 hours just creating these agencies. It wasn't just a politician saying, I want people delegate this task. He actually was the person delegating, doing everything. It wasn't him just signing a piece of paper. No, he was
Wonder it
actively
was such a
involved
shit
in
show.
everything.
It was he was managing everything micro from 10,000 feet.
So it does
Yeah,
to
I
me
know,
feel
but
like
he was
this
like-
election is like Teal versus Cheney, but on a more bigger level. But Teal's project 2020. I mean, I wouldn't really say it's 2025 versus 47. But what do you think about that? This idea that there is a techno elite, like even
legal security.
Hey, I like what they tried to do
Judignal.
here, okay? I tried my best. Project 25, Legislative Executive, this is what a lot of the left is trying to say, even though Heritage Foundation was an Obama-associated group that was creating, Project 2025. I think that we're going to see an abandonment because of the way it's looking, where the left and the right of the neoliberal, neoconservatives have become one allied thing, the old versus the new. It's going to be the old system versus the new system. And I don't think Project 2025 is actually going to be implemented. It's going to be straight up privatization of banking systems through cryptocurrency blockchains to these anarcho crypto companies, right? This is what Bitcoin is for. This is what Square and what Dorsey and this is what they've been trying to do, right? And so everyone who thinks this is a war against the left and the right are missing it because this is new money versus old order.
Yeah, no, the way I don't even see it as being as left and right anymore. It's getting weird. The Democrats have so many different buckets that their voters fit into that don't agree with each other that it almost seems like they're going to split as a party, and the Republicans aren't better. I always tell people, like, imagine an alternate future where this year Donald Trump was a Democrat this entire time, and he's running against like Mitch McConnell. Like that would probably put a lot of people in a different perspective for him. You know what I mean? And like when you realize that the Democrats, like, who are they really serving? Like, yeah, sure, they're progressive when it comes to certain issues, but then they have a bunch of people in their fold who are actually pretty religious conservative, and they just kind of happen to be Democrats because they're throwing them a biscuit when it comes to like the public coffers. Like where does their actual party stance, like their like can you sum up Democrat mantra in 3 sentences without having a bunch of corollaries for every other group?
Equity.
All right. They serve their daughter's black boyfriend.
I really see it as
You're only allowed to say that because of the fact that you were on Alex Stein's show and you played Darius. That's the only reason you get away with that. I'll tell you.
The way I
That's like-
see it is they're a bunch of out of touch college kids who don't realize what it is to have to actually put in a hard day's work. And that's why they think that scarcity doesn't exist and they can just hand out everything forever without running out.
Yeah.
That's how their lives have been.
Also, you
They've
get away
never
with
run
that.
out of anything important like heating oil, you know? Like, I don't know what it's like to have to take a cold shower or no shower before they leave the house in the morning.
I hate to be
think they
like
don't-
this, but also it's not Darius saying that. Like, this is actually what this is the way the rest. I've been looking at Chinese impressions of American citizens, and it's
That sounds like Wei Han Zhang.
it's uncanny. It's uncanny what you just said. Like, I know, like, I thought it was kind of rude, and I think people might have thought of you as curt, but this is the impression of American woman. I whine, complain all day, have 17 abortions from black man sex. Do not know how cook hot pot.
But
live
wait,
messy,
is this
disgusting
guy
apartment,
is this
all
guy
men, bad
serious or
garbage.
is he just?
This is real.
Is he
I'm-
just-
The parody account.
I think
This
he's
guy-
just mad that he's not getting any American women to date him.
well, you
No.
know.
Oh wait,
Fair.
can you put Wei Han Zhang?
Wait,
Wei
how-
Han Zhang.
Zhang. I don't know how to find it, but I'll try. Is it
WIHAN space ZHAN.
Oh, right. Wei Hang Zhang, the meme. Okay, this guy here. Right.
Jesus Christ.
No, but I only bring it up like because
the
you
littlest
did.
biceps ever.
I only bring it up because you brought it up, but also because since we did, it's interesting to know how other people look at you, right? So I think, for instance, John, you know how British people are interpreted both by the Americans and maybe by like the Indians, and I don't know, like you can see there's a difference of interpretation of what it is to be from England, right? People have a different perspective than an Englishman might on being English, right?
Okay. Yeah. Well, there's obviously the generic profile of people who are British, but that's changed a lot, especially over the 21st century.
Right.
Doesn't really
People
mean
think you're more
as much
intelligent
as
just because you have that accent.
John is though, but yeah.
Yeah, that used to be, yeah, I know. It used to be that you could somebody like me, I could get a job in America just because of my voice, and it's like, oh, he sounds like he works for the BBC,
True.
because I could
BBC.
Yeah, there was a kind of actually
Yeah.
true. Like Americans would think of you as I would buy something from you because you're smarter. I would think of you as smarter. Maybe
More
if
refined.
I was a normal American 20 years ago, I might. I wouldn't normally because I saw too many Orbit Scum commercials, but I think other people would think that British people were superior because of that. But today, I think if you look at American propaganda, maybe 20 years ago, people would have thought Americans were wild. Wow, that guy's crazy. He could be in charge. I don't
Jackass.
know, like a jackass. But now you look at an American, it's like that guy's unhinged. Like I think world media of America,
Jackass.
like he's an unhinged jackass. It's dangerous. Americans are dangerous. That's what the propaganda message is, right?
Is
Like,
that
they're
Alex
loose
Jones's
cannons.
fault? Because
I don't know who to
a
blame.
lot of the impression of the crazy Americans we get are impersonations of Alex Jones, variations of Alex Jones, really.
Do you think it
Because
started
he's
like?
such an extreme character?
Do you think it started then? I think it started during the Iraq invasion. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's a Texan, isn't he? He's got this strong American accent. And,
George Bush is actually born in
yes.
Connecticut. It's a fake.
Yeah, he's not.
He,
Yeah, it's
he
all
moved.
fake.
he moved to
Bush is
Texas.
Not really.
He moved to Texas 6
So-
months before he ran for governor of Texas, but he did study as a minor before. He did major business in law, but his minor at Yale was theater. Right. So if you really think about it, George Bush is
George Bush's
George
minor
W-
was in theater. Get
George
out.
W. Bush is a
I
genius.
Fucking
George W. Bush.
hate theater kids.
George W. Bush is a theater kid. You think about it. He's a Yale genius theater. He's a Yale trained actor. I think people don't understand how intelligent he is because he plays a character that people believe. He's a believable character.
Acting is an art that has like a legitimate place in the world. People fucking demand it, but if you make it your business to perfect the art of lying, don't ever expect me to trust you.
Well, I trusted one thing, which was when I saw near the end they took a shoe. Somebody took a shoe and he threw it at.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, at Bush. And Bush.
Yeah, I saw that.
He
Yeah.
did this Matrix
Yeah.
thing where he bent backwards, and I was like, okay, this is who you really are. Like you.
Yeah, no, the guy. The guy was,
Yeah.
I think when he played football or something, right? He was in some kind of sports when he was young. He's not a
And his
wimp.
favorite song is My Sharona, right?
No fucking
He's into painting now as well, isn't he? George
he's
Bush?
also a great painter. I would say this is the very scary thing though, that he's so good at painting makes me feel like it's not him. It's like a being John Malkovich kind of thing. Like, can you really trust that that's even him anymore? What about, okay, we did talk about
Yeah.
UFOs for a second. I wanted to bring that up. I don't know if it's a hard segue. We could talk about whatever you want to, but it's interesting that this week in America, we're seeing Grissom Joint Air Force base. There's all these weird UFO sightings. And the argument that they're saying is UFO drones are surveilling America's most sensitive military sites, but we have laws that stop us from shooting them down, right? Like, so...
I think we could circumvent those by just ignoring them. It's like, yeah, the military did it. You gonna go arrest them? All right, do it.
Well, what they're saying is the fleets of dozens of mysterious UFOs, they're not claimed to be from the Pentagon, right? The Pentagon's saying that they don't know exactly whether these drones are from China or from some company, but that they're not
Who
theirs.
cares? Just the military
you're-
should just send up a net, get rid of them, and then if somebody claims to have lost some property, they fill out a form, and in 10 years they'll get a check for 2 cents. Big deal.
I think the concern also is like, what if they hit somebody? There's like federal laws that prohibit the military from
Like I
shooting
said,
down
use a net.
drones with the potential risk to troops and civilians, right?
Just use a big ass net, like with 4 drones on the corners of it, and just swoop them.
What
up
if
with
it's
big
got
swoop.
a nuke or something?
If
I mean,
those
there's
UFOs, if you interact with them, they will hit back.
yeah, that's the
What?
idea.
They will shoot back. That's no. There's been multiple people that have gone missing in the 1950s and 1960s. Multiple fighter jet pilots who did try to intercept on them.
Then honestly, then what should be done when people start going missing? We should start profiling it to figure out where they're going. Start taking numbers and shit. You know what I mean? They figure out exactly when and where. So like, all right, how fast was the object moving that got to them? What are the limits on how it moved and shit?
Well, it would be like direct right angle, tax velocities, exceeding way over Mach 1, Mach 2, Mach 3 without shock waves, just over the top stuff that you could not. Everyone was pretty sure 1960s and 1970s that we did not have the technology then.
A lot of the times, if the object is moving in a way that it wouldn't be physically possible for a physical object, it's probably just like a projection into the air of like some ionized air.
What?
Ionized air. You can ionize air with by crossing lasers and shit. So you can produce an artifact like a laser dot in the air, and you can sweep a laser dot across the surface faster than the speed of light because it's not a physical object.
Right.
So if you have a laser dot in the air, then you could start creating crazy acrobatic.
When was the laser
When
was the laser created?
Well, I mean, arguably we've had lasers
1955, but guess what? These objects have been here way before that.
Arguably we've had lasers a lot longer than the 20th century, though, because when you start looking at lenses and how lenses have existed, unilateral directed light sources have existed probably since Socrates, right? Like there's
to do it in an industrial type of fashion, that would be 20 miles into the air. You're 70,000 feet up in the middle of the Pacific.
I'm just saying, if it's moving like that, then the odds are it's not a physical object; it's some kind of projection.
Yeah,
projection from who's doing the projection?
There's a phenomenon called phaeton.
I mean, it's
who is the right question?
Guys, let John. What were you saying?
Yeah, there's a phenomenon called Fata Morgana illusion. If you look at it, look it up.
Say it again. Fata O'Connor illusion.
Fata Morgana illusion. Yeah, as in the Arthurian character, and it showed that people would believe they saw floating ships and things like that. Right. Obviously, and it's all just yeah. So you can see things that are like over the horizon, and you can see things that aren't there. Sort of like just an illusion. So that might have been like UFO sightings in the past.
There's also 3-dimensional illusions where like the canopy of a aircraft will make it look like there's an object because it's like a weird pinch point for light. And when you move and turn the aircraft, it'll actually look like the thing is maneuvering because it won't stay in exactly the same position because the sun is moving relative to you.
Yeah.
And it can make it look like there's something that's following you that would be totally physically impossible.
Well, I mean, these are okay. everyone,
just saying,
you
like,
know,
Foo
the
Fighters might
1940s,
not
we're
be
talking,
physical
everyone who
objects.
saw these were fighter pilots who had like 4 to 5 years of experience, who also know what mirages are. You know, and a lot of these think, you know, they weren't on the horizon. They never were on the horizon. There have been multiple attempts, though, of people dying, of untrained people dying off of the coast of Florida in the 1960s.
Oh, yeah, just because it's a projection of plasma doesn't mean it's not a fucking hazard. Just means it doesn't weigh anything. Yeah, like if I had a laser beam that was like 1 watt, that doesn't mean the thing at the end of the beam has like a physical existence. That's like, I'm not throwing something across the room to set it on fire, but the thing at the other side of the room is still on fire, bro. Like, that laser dot, just because it doesn't have a physical existence doesn't mean it's not fucking dangerous.
Where did the laser beam come from? And what I was saying is, you know, there have been there's a very famous crash where 5 pilots, you know, died in a training accident off the coast of Florida in the 1960s because they got they had the mirage effect occur, and they didn't know where Florida was with respect to where they were. I forget which one it was called, but you can look it up. It was a very famous
confuse
one.
Up and down in a craft like that.
Yeah, people have, but you also have your gyroscope.
I think also having dynamic performance, high altitude balloons that have lasers and they can direct the air around the balloon because they can heat and cool the air around the balloon, as well as the balloon itself can change temperatures based on the coating of the balloon can become darker or become lighter, and there's ammonium sulfide gas which interacts with the heat and then can cause the balloon to rise and fall. I mean, it's very easy to make it lighter.
You could
than
even
air.
do it from a satellite. Like,
Right.
if you had 3 satellites and you just cross the laser beams and you ionize the air at one particular point,
Right.
a few miles
We're
above it.
talking about what? People seeing UFOs in the 1940s. There's no satellites.
Well, hold on.
There was no public satellites.
Yeah. What about the black?
I'm not quite sure how to help you.
Oh, man, the Illuminati
one from
heard me in the back there.
1943 that the Germans launched off of a modified V2.
I don't know if I would go as far as to say I know that as a fact. All I know is that the Black Knight satellite is something that everyone likes to blame on everyone else. The Germans thought the British did it. The British thought the Germans did it.
It really looks like just a big frame coated in plastic so that you can't see what's underneath it.
It's so old, right? Like the pictures that we have of the Black Knight.
Are we talking about the satellite that Tesla apparently recognized from its radio source?
Right, yeah. So this is the photo taken during the STS-88 mission, but it's gone back. People have seen it for a long time, and people suggest it's been around for 13,000 years. Something that's
when was
orbiting
the first
Earth.
Confirmed sighting of the thing?
Well, it was photographed for the first time in the 60s, but it was noticed by radio in the during the Carrington event, right?
Yeah, Tesla noticed that there was this there was a satellite that was giving off this very weird beep sound in the 1930s, I believe it was.
But they'd already known it before that, because in the when's the Carrington event? 1811.
I think Carrington was in the mid 19th century.
They had
telegraphs then.
1859.
Yeah,
okay, so 1859 is when they started noticing it, and they're saying there's something very strange going on. And this is also before they had a lot of understanding of what they were able to see, but this is when they started realizing that there was some sort of a micro moon-like object that was somehow orbiting. And from there, once technology got to a further point, we started looking into it. We could say, I think 1960s is when the STS-88 mission happened, but by that point he'd already had radio confirmation by the Germans and by the Italians. And then when the British started to research it, that was when everyone said, okay, well, it must belong to Britain. But now looking back, it seems much older than anything Britain could have launched itself, right?
Now, this is needs to be noted. Any type of satellite like this, mathematically, cannot exist for more than 50 or 100 years before it goes into the atmosphere. There's
right. So that's the other weird thing.
And this is actually something that
is that thing actually experiencing drag?
There's no reason that it should still be up there. If it's been up there for that long, that's anomalous.
Any type of a small asteroid that gets caught in Earth's orbit and starts orbiting it with the moon, it's an unstable orbit. It always crashes into the Earth, or it gets blown
or spins out. I mean, the moon itself that we have is theoretically moving a foot or two away every year.
Yeah, but
right?
you can't have a third body.
Right.
We know this mathematically is impossible for that to occur. And we knew that since the early 1930s, 40s. And I think it was Clyde Tomagay, or the guy that found Pluto. He was assigned to look for potential large objects that were, asteroids that were orbiting the Earth as a second moon, because they thought there could have been like an extra, asteroid that was a moon that was orbiting us, and they wanted to do a space station on it. But he knew that was physically impossible at the time to occur. So something was a little weird off with him on that. And he grew up and he was doing a lot of his experiments in Arizona and in New Mexico. So a lot of his observing. So something's a little bit off on that.
I mean, do you have any thoughts? Do anybody think that it's some sort of ancient alien craft, or do you think it's do you think it's just a piece of plastic? What do you think is going on that we have this thing that's spinning around here? I mean, it's something that we all are saying, hey, there's something out there. Well, here's something. What do you think it is?
Well, I would say this. If
you're muted, Steven, but I want to hear you.
No, I want to say, honestly, this is the first time I've ever heard of this conspiracy theory.
It's crazy, right? No one even talks about the Black Knight.
I mean, there's not even a conspiracy. We don't even know who put it there. So, like, if we said someone was conspiring, then we'd have to be pointing at them. It's just like, what the fuck is that thing?
It's fascinating. I'll have to do some more research on it because I've never heard of this before. But and I don't know if there's any connection to the Carrington event, but but as I was reading, Tesla seemed to have picked it up something. So it's interesting. I love this kind of stuff. I tend to be a skeptic about most things, so I tend to think it's probably just a piece of space debris, but I'm always open to different
it's funny.
ideas.
It does look a bit like a bit of a Cylon's wing, Cylon fighters. I can't remember.
It could be a remnant of like a secret spacecraft from the 40s or even the 30s that just exploded also.
No, this is something that happened way before that. We know Tesla, there was that satellite, thing that came before that.
All right, but like if you go back far enough, there might have been a secret program.
You're talking about a secret program that existed before.
May have had an unmanned secret space program that nobody fucking talked about
before Napoleon. Okay, but that's already a weirder.
Dude, there was radio and shit back then, and we had like the basic understanding of propulsion for like at least war devices. We just weren't confident enough to put humans in them.
I mean,
what if we were confident enough to put like a radio? What if people started by putting like those click radios in fucking cannonballs, and then they just started launching them higher and higher and higher into the atmosphere, and by like 1890 they had gotten one orbit around Earth?
What's the myth though? The ancient
Chinese...
that
you can't you would have to shooting a satellite from a gun. That was a prominent thing that happened in the 1960s.
Maybe
70s,
not one orbit.
The Israelis murdered the guys that were doing it.
But Jules Verne did talk about.
Well, if you really think about it, though, like a rocket is just a series of guns that shoot smaller guns.
Well, but Jules Verne's
from
Earth to the Moon. Jules Verne's describing a bullet train. Essentially, it's a rocket gun that shoots the spaceship to the moon. Right? That was the idea of his, because he didn't think that there'd be in the vacuum of space capacity for.
Rockets,
thrust.
Right?
So the idea was to create enough thrust to get it out of our atmosphere from a gun, like a space gun, and then that would continue it onto the moon. That was what, and I think the earliest silent films that we have from the Earth to the moon are showing this idea of the rocket gun.
Yeah, I think that people were getting into weird shit with space travel, like probably almost not a full century, but the better part of a century earlier than we are allowed to know about.
The Chinese say it was 1,000 years ago. Right? The Chinese say that they had rockets 1,000 years ago. They have a whole myth about a guy who goes to the moon and never comes back.
When I say space travel, I mean unmanned space travel. I don't think we had manned rockets until the 20th century. But I think we were sending things up that could communicate. Like we had basic radio in the 1800s and shit. The only thing you could send was a click. It would have to be Morse code.
How about lost civilizations, though? I mean, if you're going to go to ancient aliens, why not just ancient in general? What about
ancient China? Are not aliens.
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. What about an ancient lost? Do you think that we could have collapsed?
Create fuel that.
You don't think we have a collapsed
liquid fuel
civilization?
Or
you don't think we have like an Atlantis situation where we've lost everything? You think this is like the peak? You think this is like the best we've got so far?
No, I'm just saying there could have been. That's totally possible. I'm saying that there could have been people doing weird shit with propulsion and electronics 150 years ago.
I wonder about this idea of there being a lost civilization. You know, I love Tartaria. I can't help but think there has.
There was definitely people living in the land that was flooded 15,000 years ago. It doesn't have to be specifically Tartaria. There could have been a lot of different civilizations in different parts of the world. Think about it. Australia was larger too. South America was larger. There were probably all sorts of Native Americans there that will never know what they were doing or when they were doing it because their entire city was flooded. And South America has how much less, like how many hundreds of coastline that was flooded.
I can't help be happy that there's
really
a
cool
new
Incas
season
down there.
That new season of Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse is cool. It's got Keanu Reeves on the first episode, which is pretty funny.
Oh, so has it dropped? Has the first episode dropped on Netflix?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, you should check it out.
I
But I don't know what do you Steve? Do you feel anything about this idea, like ancient civilizations?
I'm fascinated by the idea of ancient lost civilizations, even on perhaps Mars and that kind of stuff. I've always been interested in this idea that there could have been a civilization that was destroyed. Even in the Bible, it talks about the world being flooded. So there seems to be this common mythology about there being a antediluvian world that existed before us, and that maybe mankind was at a higher level and was educated and was able to do things that we can't even do to this day. I'm open to the idea, and also the thing is too is that things do get destroyed. I mean, I find it interesting that, like, if you look at North America, like, why weren't there major civilizations built by, like, the Great Lakes or other places or on the coasts like you would see in the rest of the world? Why is one of the biggest civilizations in the interior of a jungle in Guatemala? It's kind of interesting to think that there could be civilizations that did exist, but we don't have any trace of. So
no, there was plenty of North American civilizations going on. It was just a lot more thin because there was less resources and it was harder to get through a winter than it was in the tropical areas.
See, that seems weird though, because in Moscow they had a great civilization. Cold places have great civilizations.
Yeah,
I'm just saying it flourished more in the Americas near the equator than it did in the.
I think that's only from the Smithsonian. If I look at actual records of the heartland, you start to see crazy things, all sorts of architecture and destroyed things, right? And the main story they tell you, but they'll tell you that, oh, well, the Native Americans were so ignorant, they didn't know how to use a wheel. Never mind that they had a wheel calendar. They never seen a circle before. And the Native Americans, they didn't understand how to do agriculture, so they did slash and burn. They just burned everything down so that they could chase buffalo. This is 19th century, early 20th century Eurocentric.
The Native Americans in my
education.
area had like a very big civilization in New York before white people showed up. They had like longhouses and entire villages. Like New York City was a city before Europeans ever got here. It was it was just that they didn't cut the trees down around it.
So
the ancient idea of civilization on Mars, there is something you would actually like to have this guy on your show. His name is John Brandenburg, and he was working for the government in the 1990s. And what was interesting about him was that with his 2 years of doing that work, he found he used the Mars Odyssey Explorer. He looked at their spectrogram readings of the Martian atmosphere, and he found extremely high levels of like argon 16 or something not, I can't remember the exact ones, but these were these were elements with half-lives, isotopes.
But like something that would have to be concentrated artificially?
No, they were isotopes that could only be happening in large R processes, such as in a in this solar, in the sun, or in nuclear weapons. And he found humongous amounts of that. And like, I don't know exactly how he went about figuring out how large of a nuclear device that could have been on Mars to create that much of a signature in the atmosphere, because The Martian atmosphere, if you notice, is it gets smaller every year. You know, dry ice from the surface, you know, is picked up, you know, sublimated from ground dry ice to carbon dioxide, and then the solar wind takes it away. So it's kind of hard to find that, but there is a significant amount of a signature that
Deposits,
would suggest that there was a large nuclear explosion on Mars at one point in time.
I mean, there was
Steve got cut off though. What was Steve going to say? Because he had to wait a long time.
Well, Richard Hoagland was the first person who identified the face on Mars and the pyramid structures and stuff like that. And he actually advocated that there probably was a nuclear war that happened that caused the destruction of that civilization. That was one of the things that he advocated. So I think I'll have to look into this other guy. I also want to point out, too, that I've had Scott Wolter on, who has a TV show called America on Earth on the History Channel. And he's the person who has identified a lot of ancient relics that as being authentic, like the Bat Creek Stone and other items that were attributed to ancient civilizations. He's also doing a debunk. He's going to come back on my program to debunk some frauds and hoaxes that have been about there. But he's a trained geologist, and he's kind of rewriting the history of North American civilizations, and he's a good friend of mine. And so I think it's really, like I said, I'm a skeptic, but I'd like to have these conversations. I really think these ideas are interesting to me, because I know, like, the face on Mars has been debunked, but why don't we have better images of those pyramids they found?
Right.
Well, that's the thing with the Mars, the face of Mars one, is that they know that the people that were involved with that, you know, they took the photos of it the first time, and then allegedly they took another orbit around the planet, and then they got the same shot, and then they just changed it a little bit to make it look like it wasn't a face. That was done by Carl Sagan, who was always people, you know, pretty prominent people in this movement have said that he was one of the initial liars on that, and that there was a cover up on those pictures.
I feel like pareidolia is on one hand, you get hit in the head and you start seeing faces everywhere. Like, let's be real. I've seen a lot of people that get pareidolia.
Well, I mean, if you
on the other hand, you go to the Nazca lines. You go to the Nazca lines, and you start seeing that they do make shapes. It's a thing that happens. People. So it's not without precedent that this would exist, right?
But there are 5 pyramids right next to the face of Mars.
This is what's fun. Do you know what Elon Musk's plan is to nuke Mars? Like, regardless of if it happened already or not. Yeah, so it's not that he's declaring war on Mars. It's that if you nuke Mars, he thinks that you could create clouds that would bring back an atmosphere, and then the greenhouse gases.
It doesn't have a magnetosphere, so it can't retain the atmosphere.
It's like it's not really interesting to do it on Mars.
It's a fixer-upper of a planet, Musk told Colbert.
Eventually, lighting a candle that has no wax left. It's going to burn for 2 seconds and burn right out.
Let me explain it. So it's a fixer-upper of a planet, Musk told Colbert. Eventually, you could transform Mars into an Earth-like planet. Making Mars habitable is a goal of some very smart people, mostly because one day, either due to environmental disaster or an expanding sun, or any number of disaster scenarios, the Earth will become uninhabitable. Why it might work.
The reason
nuclear weapons could be used.
Water, the reason it doesn't have. The reason it's not.
Hold on.
It's bad.
Hold on. I'm just gonna mute you. You know, I'm just gonna mute you. So right now, Mars seems like a dry, dead planet, but its polar ice caps contain an equal part of water and carbon dioxide. Nuclear weapons could be used to vaporize the carbon dioxide, releasing those materials into the atmosphere. Once the atmosphere gets thick enough from the greenhouse effect, it would kick in. Energy from the sun absorbed by the planet would release as infrared radiation, which would be trapped. This is why they want to nuke it. All right, there you go.
I don't think it's going to get thick enough because of the lack of a magnetic magnetosphere. It means the sun's going to strip it away immediately.
Yeah.
Well,
that's why it's thin.
I mean, you may have 1,000 years, but I think you would need a lot of nuclear weapons to do something like that.
But luckily, we do have a lot of nuclear weapons.
Equilibrium is where it sits now. So wherever we put it, it's going to tend back towards this. So we're going to have to constantly nuke it to keep it green.
This would continue to heat up the planet, releasing more carbon dioxide, setting up a chain reaction until ideally the surface pressure of Mars would increase enough for the liquid water to exist, making it much more habitable for oxygen-producing plants. You could start turning Mars from a red planet to a green planet, Michael Shara, curator of the American Museum of Natural History's Astrophysics Department, told NBC News.
Hey, I want you to look up the Martian giant spider or like a tarantula.
Okay.
It's a
Like
photo.
from Doom?
Challenge accepted. What? So NASA can finally explain why
Nope.
creepy spiders on Mars keep appearing. Is that
No,
it?
it's not that one. It was a photo of.
Oh my
it was
god, I
like
want
the,
to
David, David Bowie spiders.
It was one of the photos. Took a giant photo of.
Dude, you
They
just took
saw
me.
a,
You just took me
like
straight to Starship.
like thing on
This
a
is Starship
cliff.
Troopers. Like, are you kidding me? You're telling me there's space bugs? Like, there's straight up like Heinlein level? Like, we're talking
They
about.
found one. They saw a picture. They got a picture of one, and they didn't want to take a look at it. But it was straight up. It definitely looks like a spider or some creature.
Private chat link.
Hold on, I'll pull it up there. Oh, there it is. Right, this was it. This must have been.
Yeah.
That's totally it.
That was it.
Definitely.
I mean, okay, but the idea of crab people or spider people or any of that weird stuff, actually, if you think about it, in our nature, spiders are pretty practical. It makes sense that would be, and they do evolve, kind of like crabs do evolve. We have random sources of where's my cancerification crab? Why do crabs?
Carcification?
Why do
Hey,
crabs?
I have it right here.
evolve?
I have it right here.
Right.
Well, spiders are.
Why do crabs
Spiders
keep
aren't-
evolving? Why do spiders keep evolving? Random life just keeps coming up with this idea.
Only arthropods do that. And it's
No,
because
I
it
have this
minimizes the
photo
surface
right
area
here.
to volume ratio.
Do you have the photo?
Harder
Yeah,
to
put it
attack
up,
a
put it up.
crab than it is a lobster.
Wait. Let me read the. So it says NASA releases 2015 crab sitting Mars. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Crab on Mars. Of course, it wasn't a spider on Mars. It was a crab on Mars. Yeah, exactly. That's what I've been saying, man.
Honestly, if anything's going to make it to another planet from Earth, it's going to be an arthropod. If you really think about it, like a tardigrade-like creature, it's going to be microscopic. It's going to be thrown into that vacuum of space by a meteor hitting the ocean. And if it lands on another planet, maybe it can fucking survive. Who knows?
Maybe there was always arthropods on Mars beforehand.
It makes the
Like
most
the
sense that
source
crabs
of
would
life-
evolve more than humans. I think crabs are a more practical evolutionary thing than humans are very unique.
Like I'm under the belief that maybe like the type of life that's on Earth and Mars and perhaps even like Jupiter may have all had a common origin or multiple different origins or different species putting different planets. I mean, different intelligences putting species on different planets.
Fossilized crabs on Mars is hilarious. I don't know why we don't see more about that. That seems like I remember Disney did a video in the 50s talking about what they thought in history was on Mars, and a big part of that was the idea of spiders and crabs on Mars, right? And it's a giant desert, but also the idea that there were water paths, and I think that's another interesting idea.
Canals
Yeah.
on Mars. Yeah.
It looks like something condenses and re-evaporates year after year. Yeah, it's not just under the surface water, but it's probably not enough to sustain life.
I think even just the idea of Martian canals is interesting because it's talking about this feedback loop like thing. Imagine if we geoengineered Earth, right? And we said, okay, there's a lot of desert on Earth, but what if we made water paths all across the Earth? And how quickly that could go bad, how quickly we could think we're doing good because we moved water from one place to another. But then that makes it impossible for the condensation to, precipitate back where it needs to, and then eventually you just dry it out.
There's some talks about how that could be a huge force behind global warming.
Right.
Supposedly, water vapor is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide or anything else that is generally classified as a pollutant. So if you really think about it, that means the oceans could just start evaporating one day and never stop, and we all just get cooked.
Yeah, it's like 10 times more important. Granted,
Much
carbon dioxide still matters, but 10 times worse is the water vapor.
The sun would have to be like 2 times brighter or 3 times brighter for that to happen.
That happens though, right? Like the idea of solar flares, and I think that's
where you get the idea of solar stability from. It's a star, bro. That thing could can go volatile at any time, and you don't know what's going on inside of it.
I've been thinking a lot about that recently because of the book
Cosmic Fire.
Think about Noah, and so people always get that story wrong. They're like, okay, God said sorry and gave you a rainbow. It's like, no, that's not how that goes. It's that God said, I really want you to stop.
I'm done.
Didn't stop. I drowned you. And now it's like, okay, next time. And then the rainbow is, next time you do it, I'm going to light you on fire.
Yeah, I'm gonna give
next
you
time I'm not going to use water. Like, this was the last warning. You know what I mean? It's really weird how we turn that around. We make it like, oh, God says sorry. That's not real.
God doesn't
That's
say that. Doesn't
not
need
ever.
to.
Right. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I think this idea of a solar flare, I mean, when you think about it, like a worldwide flood sounds pretty bad, but a solar flare, like that's what we're constantly warned about all the time. Everyone's being told, careful, the solar flare is going to erase your phone. It's going to Y2K your whole life, right?
So good thing we moved to flash storage instead of magnetic storage, so it's not really a risk anymore.
Wait, is flash not magnetic? I'm pretty sure flash storage is still
No,
magnetic.
you can put a magnet right up against your phone. It won't erase it. But if your laptop has a rotary disk in it, it will. It's only the rotary disks you got to worry about.
That's interesting. I thought that an EMP would take out flash memory. Is that really
The
true?
EMPs destroy things because they short out the circuit. They actually overvolt parts of it. Like they induce voltage, like a radio signal induces voltage in an antenna. But they induce enough to actually fry the device. That's where
Interesting. So it's literally just the voltage spike that's destroying the flash memory.
It's not an interesting, crazy.
But that still would happen from a flare.
It's just a very loud radio that makes your fucking wires pop and overheat.
But that would still happen with a solar flare. So it's likely that flash memory would be erased anyway. Yeah, okay.
Oh yeah, the only bit you just put it inside of a aluminum foil bag and you're good.
Or underground in Dr. Strangelove's lab. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so I don't know, this idea of like aliens, do you think that all aliens would be just like crab people and spider people? Like what about I think the idea of angels
I really
and demons
think that
and higher...
aliens would be so alien to us that we wouldn't even recognize them as life. Like they would not be the same size or scale as us. They wouldn't be on the same time scales as us. They might take 10 if it took 100 years for an alien to say hello to another alien, we would look at it as a mineral, you know? We would look at it as a chemical process.
And
they would look at us like weather.
Hominids.
What was that?
I think they would look all like hominids.
Like
I used to not think that, but the more I think about it, the idea that like so many things evolve into crabs, I feel like the anomalousness of us, the anomaly of us evolving into humans must mean that it's a practical thing. Like, so this is having a tandem set of everything, just in case one breaks, and being able to see and having physical touch-based sensors for your drums and for your photons for your eyes and your tongue. Everything is all touch-based, but just different nuanced views of touch. So we're basically like the same as a single cell sea amoeba that's eating, like trying to feel for feces of other life to eat. We're not that much more sophisticated.
Velociraptor has hands and eyes and eardrums and all that.
So the argument would be that that's only true because we're on Earth and maybe things are different elsewhere. But the argument against that would be that for things to work the way they do, that would be Earth-like conditions necessary on some level for that to happen.
Actually, because like if you look at other life that doesn't have a backbone, like they're wildly differently shaped. True. Even in the chordate phylum, like tunicates and shit, look wildly different from anything that has an actual skeleton in it. Our next closest relative, starfish, have a totally different body plan, and then it gets weird when you go out into the ecdysozoa, and because no other animals besides chordates and arthropods really have heads, but chordates and arthropods aren't closely related. So why do we both have a head with eyes and ears and mouth and all that? That's actually a huge problem in phylogeny.
Well, so there's some groups of people that believe that there are, I wouldn't say humans, but some sort of a civilization of life biblically before Adam and Eve. Just the rules being they're not made in the image of God. Like we're so much more in the image of God than something else before it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Like a chimpanzee or an octopus?
Yeah, like Steven, do you think of that? The idea that there might have been a pre-human civilization, or
it's speculative. I know that B.H. Roberts was an advocate of pre-Adamic civilizations. Also, and actually, I do find this whole idea that octopuses might be alien to be very fascinating.
Yeah.
That we're basically it's almost like they are an alien species, really, in many ways.
Close enough, honestly. They diverged from humans so far in the past.
Yes.
Like everything they developed independently. Like the only thing we have in common with them is that we have a central nervous system.
Cephalopods are also, whenever we want to make a movie about an alien, I think, that looks very much like a Geiger movie or something. But
we evolved brains and eyes totally independently, and we just happen to come upon the same type of face structure, which is weird.
What's weird about
that mouth
cephalopods
is
also
hideous.
is they can stop their heart, right? If you tried to kidnap certain kinds of squid, octopods are usually pretty chill about this. But if you take like a normal squid, like a Humboldt squid, you could never capture a Humboldt squid because it would just stop its heart. It wouldn't allow
Just dies
itself
on
to be.
purpose.
Yeah. There's been situations. I have a friend who's worked with cephalopods, and he did this thing where they attached a GoPro and a tracking device to. He went down, free diving, and he attached one. The thing jet down into a big old pod of a bunch of cephalopods and started flashing red. Then all the other cephalopods surrounded tore him apart, tore him into just shredded this thing. Like he was like, dude, I've been compromised. They have like a camera. I mean, this is my interpretation of what happened, but it's so weird that he was like, dude, there's something wrong with me. Get it. I can't just turn myself off anymore. Get it. Like, get rid of this thing. I think there's something conscious there.
That sounds like a scene in The Invaders. If you've seen the 1960s TV show,
No,
David Vincent has seen them. He knows they're amongst humans, and to him, the nightmare has already begun.
Oh wow!
That's the intro. That's it. Yeah,
I'm 100% gonna watch this. That sounds exactly.
Humans are the smartest.
Yeah, because when
the
invaders are caught, they do this suicide routine where they blow that.
Wow, that's totally it. Yeah, that's exactly what it's like for squid. As a Monterey Bay kid, I've seen this happen.
When they made this, they didn't know how they did the technology for this. I didn't find out how it's actually made that effect. They still don't know how to do it. I think they possibly put radiation on the film or something.
Wow, that does look cool. I'll have to study that. That's so great.
Yeah, they probably painted it with light. Yeah,
cephalopods will
photography.
I feel there's also
they communicate with their chromatophores.
Parameter on cephalopods that made them die so young or die randomly.
So imagine a Humboldt squid starts out about this size and it becomes taller than me because 6.5 meters. 2.5 meters, 6.5 feet in 18 months. A Humboldt squid will go from less than an inch to 6.5 feet,
literally
in 18 months. And there are all these stories be careful, don't they're drunk sailors that are pulled out of their boats in the middle of the night by a giant Humboldt squid, so you have to have a friend with you. It's serious. People are very afraid of a giant. I mean, it's not a giant squid, but a squid that's bigger than you, still pretty
big
giant.
enough to be a problem.
It's big enough to be a problem, especially if it has friends, right? And so the fact that its whole body is covered in an LCD television set, it actually is more like organic LEDs because it can independently flash.
Each one of those suckers has a claw in the middle. Most people don't realize that. It's not a suction cup. It actually has a fucking a grabber inside.
Right. That can spin pre-release on the Humboldt. Some of them, the pre-release, actually, they spin 360 degrees.
It's
rapidly.
so strange to me that cephalopods reach such a height because if you really look at mollusks, they're barely higher than placozoans mostly. They're literally like clams are a little lump of organs inside of a rock that happens to be able to move the rock. There's not a lot there. And then arthropods actually have a body that they can manipulate the world in. Crustaceans, insects, arachnids. They have world manipulators that's actually strong. And they what is the smartest arthropod? It's this could you think of it? I think it's a jumping spider or something like that. It's nowhere near an octopus intelligence.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, with the squid, they only live for 18 months, or maybe a year and a half more than that. I think maybe 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, but there's there feels like there is they would completely take over the ocean if they did not die randomly, or they don't.
That's what I mean. I don't think they're dying randomly. So the idea that a squid is able to switch bodies, right?
Yeah,
the idea that its entire memory set can be, if you were to take. In the 90s, you used to have these Palm Pilot devices, right? Or even your Game Boy, and you could aim them at each other.
The IR blasters.
You'd use an infrared light, and the other thing would pick up on the infrared light, and it would take that data, right? So how different is that? How different is that from a squid's body flashing all different colors, while the other squid is, with his huge eyes, able to see all of these different things? How quickly can it learn in ways we can only communicate with words? How quickly can it communicate? It could download information, essentially. full data
like
sets.
talking, like what we do. Like
What if
we're
it's
doing
more than
now.
talking? What if it's more than talking? What if it's more like sending a video game data file to another device? It's from one squid to another squid, sending its
I
entire
still
life.
think that's like dictation learning, though. But it's like if
Well,
I
that's
told
like
you a
a
story about something
bacterium,
bad that
like,
happened, and
sending
you'd
out
learn to like not
data
play in
to
traffic.
One
or
at a
something.
time. One at a time.
I think that's like if I told you, hey, I got hit by a car, you shouldn't play in traffic, and then you just remember that, you wouldn't know you wouldn't have my experience of getting hit by a car and knowing not to play in traffic instinctively. But you would have heard me tell you, like, hey, man, those things with the lights and the noise, that's dangerous.
I feel like if you're able to communicate the entire data set, it's a little bit different because you're not just telling you, hey, don't hit a car. It's like, here is the experience I had of my life the last 18 months. I got hit by a car, then you're starting from that initial condition of having that data set. It's not just words. It's not just light. It's an entire compressed file,
Could
right?
be. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like, I think they've reproduced benthically is the word for it, where they just kind of their reproductive gametes out into the ocean. They don't have to actually boink. So it really doesn't make sense to me to think of an individual squid as the actual unit of the species. It's probably more of just like a mat of how many squids are in a particular area at any given time.
What do you got, Dank Helicopter? Look at your eyes right now. I know you're thinking thoughts. How about nuclear reactors? Anybody? So you guys ever seen the
Natural ones?
Oklo?
Oh man,
Yeah,
I
the
know about
natural one I've heard of. Yeah, the one that was in Africa.
Right. This is in Franceville, which is a great name for an African town in Gabon. But essentially, they found several nuclear fission flumes, and there's a depletion of uranium that would have normally taken millions of years, but it clearly happened in a very short period of time. And so the question is, do you think that this is fully just nature creating this, or do you think this is a lost civilization, or how amazing is it that we found something else that's actually creating nuclear flumes? I mean, this is very similar to our linear accelerators or our uranium cores that we have, right?
I'm honestly skeptical as to how that much uranium could have been concentrated naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe there is an explanation of a natural process that can concentrate uranium rather than disperse it, but yeah, to think that like whatever star was here before the sun could have gone supernova hard enough to produce that much uranium that could have stayed in that concentration for that long to have then become part of the Earth out of the accretion disk that was around what became the sun. And then
I think a
only
lot
when
of the uranium
ground
is
of
actually
Earth began to
together.
react is a little
Most uranium
much for me.
Is usually grouped together in like veins. Like
What?
a lot of like material, like things. It's in veins.
So like volcanic
Most
flumes.
of our
I think
uranium is actually mined from only one or two mountains in America.
It does seem like there's the official story is like volcanic flumes are pushing out uranium and they're in specific places. How much that's true, who knows? But that's kind of the story.
But when you look at like uranium, like mining or like the textbooks, they usually say it's in veins.
I just saw Sam Fried and Microsoft are trying to do nuclear. No. Why did I do that again?
Oh yeah, they're reopening up like the 3 Mile
3 Mile Island, right?
The one of the reactors for machine learning, or
I don't know why
I think that's cool.
I don't know why I had to mix it up. Bankman Fried with Altman. That was ironic. But yeah, so the Oklo bust out. So he's actually talking about creating a nuclear startup in Gabon that's next to this nuclear reactor, right? And so this is even cooler or bigger of a deal than the 3 Mile Island thing. So 3 Mile Island, Microsoft is turning back on the 3 Mile Island reactor for the purpose of powering the AI. Obviously, AI is using so much power, and all of a sudden, boom, nuclear is turned back on. I find that kind of interesting. I'm not sure if I'm not one of those people that are super concerned by nuclear. I'll be honest. I feel like the oil companies want you to be more afraid of it, so you have to buy more oil. What do you seem to agree, Stephen?
Totally, yeah. I think
Maybe Bill Gates
you want
is
to take
using
climate
it to,
change seriously, and you're not introducing nuclear as an option, then you're not taking climate change seriously. It's,
Right.
Yeah,
Based on what we just talked about before, though, the water vapor is the main driver of the greenhouse effect. So every calorie you put into the atmosphere is a calorie worth of water that's not going to condense out of the atmosphere and onto a surface that otherwise would have condensed onto a surface. So eventually, you don't have to release a chemical. You can just put enough straight up thermal energy into the atmosphere to cause a runaway greenhouse effect based on the fact that we have oceans.
No, you would have to have a constant energy source like the sun.
We have the sun.
Yeah, but I mean, there is.
Also,
No,
it's
every
like,
calorie you put in the
type of
atmosphere
heating,
will
like,
be a
you know,
calorie
there's, like,
more of water that floats.
Exits, it disperses not.
feedback loops is the other thing I was going to say. So, like, just because it's 10x worse to have water vapor causing damage to the ozone and to the greenhouse gas effect, that doesn't mean that having a 10% increase from CO2 that's not mitigated is safe. And especially because it's such a new thing that what happens is you create feedback loops where that 10% causes another 10%, which causes
That's
another
what I'm
10%,
saying.
or 9 and 9 and 9 and 9.
Every just joule of energy you release into the atmosphere will cause a greenhouse effect. It doesn't have to be a chemical.
Right. And so it's important to see that also, that the places where we have the most CO2, that's where plants are happiest. Okay. So like the rainforest is feeding off of CO2. And it's very logical that places like Stalingrad would become a rainforest in the future, because that's where the CO2 is today and where plants will feed.
Yeah, CO2 is what plants crave.
I thought it was wrong,
Yeah,
though.
I mean, like, yeah. And it's kind of like the people that are always bitching about the CO2 levels, they don't really know what they're talking about, because like a lot of what, the excessive CO2 has provided huge amounts of, the crops, how our crops are doing so well now is directly related to how much CO2 is in the air.
Atmospheric fertilizer.
Yeah.
I wasn't kidding when I said it's what plants crave. It's literally
when you look up if you go to Colorado now, or you go to the green the tree line on most trees on most places in Colorado is about 100 meters higher than it was about 50 years ago.
That's crazy.
And you see that in Siberia is at the tree line now, and this is not from change in temperature, but it's solely because of more CO2 in the air. It's about 10 miles further up.
Yeah, most people don't realize that plants grow out of the air, not the ground. They just root themselves in their grounds. The cellulose that makes up most of their mass is made out of CO2 and water that they get from the air.
Yeah, that's photosynthesis.
Psychic levitating daisies, for sure.
But like the water and the CO2 get bound together by sunlight. That's photosynthesis. If you want to get that sunlight back out of the wood, you just set it on fire. That's heat and light that was shined on it by the sun and stored, and then you're pulling it back out. It's not magic, but it's damn close.
What I'm saying is that if we somehow just decided or had the ability to shut off all of man-made CO2 production, it would lead to a catastrophic environmental impact where everything dies. It's like, it's like the economy, you're not giving it enough stimulus. We have a lot more predators. We have more wildlife because of an excess of CO2 right now. And we had, during the ice ages, or even any hunter will tell you about how if you have too many predators and not enough producers, then everything dies because the predators just eat everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's only plants left. So there's been these like type of cycles of where this goes catastrophically wrong. And it should be looked into a little bit more of maybe it's not a good idea to completely shut off all of our cars. Because it's like, what? This idea that somehow that the ocean's going to rise like 6 feet. It's never really been nothing.
It is
proven
weird
about
looking
this.
at all these photos of the ocean not rising. For like, I look back 100 years, I look back 150 years. When am I going to see some? I want to see a little action. I'm just getting kind of confused here.
Yeah, like the Liberty Island has had the same sea level on it the entire time.
I know she should be lifting her skirt by now. This is crazy. Like, what's even happening? I
So
don't
it's
Because
understand.
of high waters.
So it's like
Maybe it's all those
very-
AI
it's-
supercomputers.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
most of this like like the global warming thing is more of a it's a Protestant guilt complex thing that's just like, oh, I'm inherently a bad person for
Why does
just-
that work on everything? It's so crazy. But every time,
I'm like the Catholic
Wait.
version of that too. Oh, we're inherently sinful. Look at the environment; it's going to shit. It's like, no, it isn't, you retard.
I feel like
Well-
some people are just born with like a guilt complex, and it's just like that was naturally exploited by like the people who created and like not created, but eugenically like pushed society along the way is that it did. And I think any forms of laws are a type of eugenics, because even if you don't follow the smallest law, that will make your life a living hell until you're not even able to support yourself, let alone a family. So yeah, like that's just kind of what they exploit. It's like if you can be made to feel guilty, you could be made to participate in society, you know. And if you're not made to feel guilty, you're more likely to go unilateral.
Is this your site, Sean? I'm just making sure I have it ready. Is what
That's
you got
me.
now? All right, that's pretty cool. Okay, but we got a few more minutes, like a half hour maybe, if we want. I just want
Hey,
to
Andres,
cover.
I
I
have
have to
to.
eventually go.
I have to jump out now.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Good. I was
reach out to
gonna.
me when you're done, and we'll.
Let me just really quickly like celebrate you for a second. So everybody, I want you to follow our buddy Steven. He's amazing. This is his channel. I want you to check out Mormon Book Reviews right here. This is his video with Roger Lonnie, as we talked about earlier about
You got
Roswell.
Project Mongo on. It's the wrong thing.
Oh, this is not the right one for the
Oh
project.
no! Oh yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. There we go. I misread it. Yep. There we go.
Sorry, no. MBR, Mormon Book Reviews. This is Pineker's channel. But also he has that video that we were talking about earlier where he literally talks about Roswell, which is, it's not just about the Book of Mormon, but it's pretty great. I actually would highly recommend his channel. He's probably one of my favorite people out there. And I hope that you come back and do a show with us soon. Let's do a ladder wave coming up. But I'm glad you had the time to talk about sci-fi and aliens and things like that, because
I'm always game for this stuff.
I don't hear you talk about that enough because people don't let you. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah, no, this is a great platform to be able to have these great, awesome conversations with y'all. And I really enjoyed talking with you guys today. And I hope to join in once again down the road.
Dude, love you and love to your mother. God bless you. See you soon.
Bye.
What a good guy. I love him. All right. So we're going to also check out a few more things I want to do before we move to the next subject.
I want you to look up the Charles Hall's book on the fourth of the series.
I feel bad too because I really wanted to show Pineker you. I was like, look. You gotta understand what like white Darius means to people, because like there's actually like a hold on. Here, this is what
Male, or was this a biological female transitioning to a male? You should know. You're an expert. You've transitioned and you've detransitioned, so theoretically you should know.
Definitely a rodeo clown.
Rodeo clown! You're just jealous because your surgeries didn't.
You're so ahead of the curve. It's crazy. Like this is literally what the Bachelorette guy is doing now. You know what I mean? Like that's White Darius. That's Aiden right here. That's our buddy. This is
okay.
This is
what
him.
I said was you're so
that?
jealous your surgeries didn't work out for you. That was something a bunch of like 19-year-old girls said at UNT. Both me and Alex were there.
What's going on?
Like
Look at this.
19-year-old girls that were protesting a anti-trans speaker who was like crazy gay man that was a hooker in the 1980s Dallas scene. But he is just talking about how it really did not cure anything, and it was really
people
bad.
weren't made more happy by it. But it's funny because you did all that, and people were making fun of it, and they were saying this is crazy, and how it's probably just respectful, blah blah blah. And then you have this Josh Sider went and he did this same thing, but just a bit more because he spent like a couple months doing it, and he was saying, okay, well, I'm going to show what happens if I act like a mentally, what's the word for it? Someone who's mentally harmed and somebody who has fragility of psyche. And I'm going to see what happens if I put that out and if people will be there for me or if they'll celebrate it. And wouldn't you know it, they exploit and celebrate it, even though it's clear that he's got. I mean, he's not just pretending to be trans; he's pretending to be a trans person.
Are those tattoos real?
Yeah, because he was originally. This is the guy above, right? Josh Sider. He's a normal guy who was on The Bachelor show, and he lost or something. But then he thought, you know what I'll do? I'm gonna go back and pretend to be trans and go through the entire journey of what it's like, because I've seen so many people who are not actually trans but have psychological disorders, and they're being exploited by this movement, and how far the movement will allow the exploitation of a mentally unstable person. And so I think it's an interesting effort to show that people will use anything, even if it hurts others, for their own cause, right? I mean, it's one thing to say that you want to protect the rights of an individual to be who they are, to take whatever drugs they want, take whatever hormones they want,
That's
cut whatever off they
libertarianism,
want.
right?
Yeah, if you want to make a hole in your ear or
You
your
have a
belly
body,
button or
do
your
what you want
wiener,
with it.
I'm American about that. But at the same time, if you're pushing that somebody who clearly, I mean, he's crying in these videos and is acting like he's going through a lot, and they're celebrating it, and that was why it was such an important thing. It's no
Yeah, if
longer a
somebody's
joke at that
not
level.
well, you need to
Not well.
be honest with them about that.
Luckily, it turns out he is well. And I remember months ago when this started, someone sent this to me all sad and angrily, like, "Oh my God, look what
Are
happened
those
to him."
implants, or does he just have gyno from not doing steroids correctly?
Correct, and from drinking beer. Yeah, exactly. He's just he's a guy with gyno. But you know what? The point is the same that I called it months ago, and I told I forget who asked me. I was like, "Yeah, I'm sure that they're just faking it. If they're not, that's crazy." And boom, of course they are. But people have been pushing so long that all of this is real, that we have to be defensive of anyone. And so it's weird. What do you do when you feel like you want to help a friend,
Oh my
you want
God,
to defend a person, but they're not well, they're not mentally well? Sorry, Aiden. Go
I
ahead.
would talk to them about it. You know what I mean? Be like, yo, like if you want to make a crazy decision, I'll support you in that, but just be of clear mind before you go into it, please.
How are you going to be on clear decisions if you're taking hormone blockers and estrogen and you know what
Oh
I mean?
yeah, you gotta get yourself to like center before anybody could.
So maybe you need to have a certain level of sobriety before you're able to make emotional decisions about what drugs or chemicals or hormones
That
would
sounds perfectly
help you.
reasonable.
Oh,
Wow.
something
It
I
sounds like
wanted
a
to
total prerequisite. Yeah.
That might upset some people.
something I wanted to mention was Dr. Sidney Gallagher, and she was a doctor that used to advertise on TikTok for trans surgeries.
Yeah, you shouldn't be allowed to advertise medicine directly in the United States, just like in other countries.
It was SIDHBH and then space Gallagher, GALLAGHER. But what was funny about her was that she was advertising these surgeries on TikTok. Like she got like this Grand Kiwi Farms, like massive Kiwi Farms thread on her too.
All right, I want to get RGZ on here at some point. RGZ, reach out because we got to talk more. Because like I'm very curious about this. So you're thinking that saying that before you let someone do, I don't know if maybe you're just being super sarcastic, but I want to take you seriously. Maybe the idea that if somebody wants to do life-altering changes to their body, should we just completely let everyone do everything? Like, I mean, yeah, right? Like, why would you ever stop someone from having any freedom? If someone wants to cut off their dick, fine. What am I saying that I want to stop you from doing that? That's rude of me. Am I crazy? Like, shouldn't I? I mean, it's because like I honestly feel like maybe I'm in the wrong here for saying that you should try to
stop them. You know, but
why do I care so much?
If you care about them, then you got to make sure that they're not like in psychosis or on some kind of a drug that's making them not understand things correctly when they're making that decision.
I think it's because you see the differences between like a one-off and an entire society geared around a thing. Like, so if a woman wants to like get out of a pregnancy because she was raped, that's the exception to the rule. Instead, we create a systematic genocide of the persons of color of the United States, where more than 80% of all black people are murdered before they're born, right? And that industrialization,
I don't think it's that high, but I think
pretty bad.
it's higher than most people would be comfortable with. Yeah,
It's pretty bad. And yeah, I think it is
I
the
don't know
majority.
if it really...
Wow, I'm the one that's saying caustic things. That's amazing.
I never
Okay.
said anyone said it. I just said it was an overestimation within the order of magnitude.
It could be. Slavs exaggerate sometimes. So here's the declassified file shows how first U.S. city to be destroyed in potential nuclear war will go. Have you seen this? They just declassified.
It'd be New York City.
Be right outside of New York City, but yeah, New York would feel it right away.
No,
Yeah.
like the first thing that the Soviet Union are like, they're like, no, we're not really going to go to kill people in the heartland. We're just going to go after those damn people in the fucking Pentagon.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like
and New York State. That was about it.
Right.
Maybe
It looks like
on some sites they had no care to.
It looks like you've got some
like.
Your second spot to hit will be Chicago around Madison. There's some pretty key spots. I think like Madison's pretty important. Springfield's pretty important. But like the major locations, obviously, yeah, it's Richmond, it's Trenton, it's Harrisburg, right? It's even Boston, which is interesting that Boston's so important. But of course, if you watched last night, you probably know that Boston's pretty important, more important than people realize for this. But yeah, what do you think about this too? Because the nuclear play, like this is where so many people have made their lives. I don't know.
They want to make. Oh, that's interesting. They want to make America 99% white now.
You think so?
What? By nuking it?
I don't know if that's true because I think a lot of what I've seen is, I mean, maybe well, I don't know. I think race wars are real. I think race wars are real, and the idea that there's genocide and that people are trying to kill, like, there are definitely elite groups that want to murder entire other peoples. What's different to me about the United States today, though, is that all of these places are integrated, and the European descent Americans that you're calling white, which I think white is a weird term. It's like you're saying you've erased your culture from being a pink European, and now you're homogenized white like the Babylonian cloaks that the House of Sod wear, right? That's not the same kind of white.
All right. Hey, I gotta go.
That's your limit? All right. Well, I love you.
Girl, no, I date, so.
Oh, hey, everybody, pray for Dank Helicopter's date.
Yep. God,
I hope she's okay. I hope she's okay. I really do. Yeah,
I think that like if somebody's in destroy another people's mindset, then they're probably not in an elite group. If they're in an elite group that's trying to actually manipulate the world and shit, then they're going to be manipulating political groups, not racial groups.
I keep seeing it from a Californian perspective where European middle class white, as he says, persons are not breeding, taking drugs, dying out. And so then Indians, Muslims, a lot of people that are not European, not white, they're conservative and they have kids. And within a generation, California will not be filled with heroin addicts, hippies. You know what I mean? Within a generation, very quickly, California will be filled with conservative people, probably a little brown. It's not exactly what this guy's saying. I don't think that it's an accurate portrayal of what's happening. I think they're looking for workers more than they're looking for skin color. They're looking for people that'll breed and work hard for them.
Yeah, like I said, when it comes down to elite groups manipulating the world, they're going to be doing it along political lines, not racial lines. If you're getting down to racial shit, you probably just got a guy with a chip on his shoulder driving home from work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I kind of think I kind of do. I think that's where we're at with that. I don't know. I mean, what do you think also about that? John, you're British. You see this all the time, like the changeover.
Well, I was thinking what you're saying about the racial thing. Yeah, I mean the eugenics is based on race, but I think that's being phased out, like you said, because it's not so important now. It's more important having people who actually work, and you obviously get that across the racial board. So yeah. What was your question exactly?
Oh, no, I mean, I guess just the identity. I don't know. That's kind of it. The identity of work is real. Like, I think we're moving towards.
Yeah. It's more important now because what we found in the UK is. I
think Dank Helicopter dropped the racial thing on us when he mentioned that nuking a city would change the racial makeup of America, and I immediately said I don't think whoever would nuke America is concerned with that particular aspect.
Yeah, I like White Darius because he's just so different. He thinks thoughts a very different way. Than
he is. Yeah, he's definitely a wild card.
Well, okay, how about this? How about the nightmare of the bizarre UFO jellyfish that flew over the UK town? Anybody seen that one? No.
Were there like psilocybin mushroom spores in the bread by accident? Because that tends to happen there a lot.
I don't know. I get the idea that
Warrington knows what I'm talking about.
Do you think in Britain that it's as weird as the United States? Do you think that you're seeing weird stuff, weird technology? You know, I mean, obviously you've got a pretty weird government like ours, right?
The people here are really weird. They don't really need any technology. I mean, you know, even smartphones.
British cryptids are weird too. Like the shit you guys come up with is fucking crazy.
They're all cultists. You know, David Icke talks about the global coal, and it's like, yeah, tell me about it. I say it every day, you know. Yeah, what I was thinking about in the UK is over the last few years, so last 10, 20 years, I suppose, the UK residents are getting more reluctant to do any work, and so they brought in the immigrants. And now they're all complaining, all the immigrants have taken all our jobs, but these UK people haven't actually been going out to look for work. You know, they think they're above working, picking fruits of trees and, you know, like even council work and stuff like that. They just turn down all the jobs. And it's like all our jobs are gone.
Is the United States in the same position as Britain, though, in that money is not worth as nearly as much as it used to be? Like, it used to be a guy could have a job and his wife didn't need to work. He had 2 or 3 kids and a house of his own that he owns, not rented, owns. And nowadays, it seems that it's difficult to do that even on 2 salaries. So the money is worthless. So it's not really about the fact that people don't want to work, and it's not really about the fact that the companies aren't paying enough. It's about the fact that the money that's actually being exchanged isn't worth the amount of work you'd be asked to do to earn such a thing.
Well, if people go to work, then that changes the range of income. But if everybody's on the dole, as we say, if everybody's unemployed and taking money off the state, then they all get paid the same amount. So you get sort of like it reduces the value down to the lowest level, sort of thing. So you don't get that.
Do you think people are being irrational, or do you think that they're being perhaps sardonic but rational and saying, you know, it's not worth it to me to work that hard if I'm going to get so little, so I'd rather just not do a damn thing?
Yeah, I see the logic in that, but it's not really how I live my life.
No, I understand. I'm just saying, like, you might be a little bit more, you know, have a little bit more work ethic than the average person. You might be able to rise above, but if you give people that type of a deal and that's the calculation that they make, are they being irrational, or are they just saying, you know, that's not really worth it?
They're not looking far enough forwards. I mean, it's not what the first job you get is. It's doing that job and then finding another job from that and getting that, like it's a set of work ethic. And so you look around for other things. You don't know what opportunity is going to arise, really. And if you haven't got the right skills, then you can't take the job. Say 5-10 years down the line, if you've been unemployed for 10 years, you won't have those skills, even if there's stuff like, you know, old nowadays skills like database entry or something like that. You know, you'd be you know, I don't know Excel. New Excel now, and you know, if you don't even know Excel, we can't take you on, not even as a trainee. You know,
but compared to 40 years ago in the 1980s, when it would be you'd be able to have a man support his family on one income.
In the 1980s in England, you had the Ministry of Silly Walks. Like, there was so many more jobs. You have no idea.
I'm just saying, it makes sense that a house should be more expensive than it was in the 80s, but a job should pay more than it did in the 80s. And if the money itself isn't worth as much, then why would you work more than twice as hard for less than half as much? That doesn't make sense to me. Like, a lot of people are going to calculate that and say, you know what, all right, fine, I'll just not do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the 80s, you had things like infinite credit in the UK, and also you had the if you were specialized in your job, then you could, you know, earn like £1 million a year or whatever.
Just AI generated British people, by the way.
And it's all because they were like the first people on that particular boat. It wasn't that they were geniuses or anything like that. It was just the fact that they learned it like a computer programming, you learn some old crusty language like COBOL or something like that. And that's it might be really untrendy and nerdish, seen by the public, but it's actually really quite well paid. And
what I'm saying is, if the value of the returns is reduced in time, it makes sense that people would be working less hard.
Yeah. Yeah, on average, yeah. But
if you could say to everyone that, you could have a wife and kids on one income, then I'm sure they would work their ass off at that job.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. I feel like Britain after the war is different than Britain after the 80s. You know what I mean? Like, people worked a lot harder at that time. And now, I don't know, I'm not you, John, but do you see a disillusionment?
Yeah, just sort of like retreating from work, and sort of like, I think they seem to think that computers can take over, AI is going to take over or something like that.
True. Also cocaine. Like, is cocaine as big of a deal as I think it is? I get the feeling that if I went to Britain, I would see more cocaine than in Colombia. Am I crazy?
I haven't seen any cocaine use, but I imagine people would go to clubs and stuff and use it.
Yeah, I mean, they tell us in America, they're like, if you go to Europe, if you go to England and you rub your finger on any toilet or urinal, it'll just be covered in powder.
Get contact hide. Yeah.
It's in the water. That was the thing, actually. Cocaine in the British water. Is this real? Raw sewage dumped in Britain had cocaine and all sorts of pills, high on cocaine. They're like, whoa, crazy, all the drugs in Britain, because there's just... Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems like that might help, actually, get people to work harder if you put cocaine in water.
Sure. Drinking water for the cake.
I'm just saying, make the money worth something, and then people will work for it. But if
well,
money ain't worth nothing, don't fucking expect people to bust their ass over it. That's fucking stupid.
So how does that work in Britain, though? Isn't it like your money goes bad? Like your paper notes can only last for like a year or something, and then
we have the same problem in America, though, too. Like, the money isn't worth enough to make people want to work.
Well, we have inflation, but British notes actually expire, so you have to use your money.
Oh, like if you hold on to a note for too long, you can no longer fucking spend it. What?
Yeah, isn't that right, John? That like old British money goes bad.
Yeah, so it's true. It's that's builders and people like manual laborers.
So if you got a note in your pocket, one day it's worth money, the next day it's rag.
God, what's wrong with me? All these British like AI generated girls from Kent. I'm into it. I want to hang out. I'm
sure you can send to the bank and they'll fund you. You give you back new ones, and they're phasing them out anyway. The old notes, and they're getting Chuckles' face on it.
Chuckles. That's what we call him. Chuckles. That's adorable. Oh, okay. So
Chuckle Brothers.
We talked previously just for like a second. You brought up John, like David Icke, and I was wondering, is there anything kind of like wild that you've been thinking about you wanted to bring up, because this is a good opportunity, and we'll do this again in the future because I didn't really give you any warning, but maybe there's some stuff.
Nothing in particular about it, David. Like I recommend his book, The Trap. I mean, I've learned to listen to it as an audio book. I got like all the way through, and it's even more depressing than 1984 of Brave New World put together.
That's a good review.
Recommendation.
When did you first get into Icke, and like how deep would you say you are into seeing the world upside down, like seeing that the world is upside down, right?
Well, I read part of Children of the Matrix, so sort of maybe in the whenever to early 2000s, but I sort of decided to study other things instead. But the first time I've got through the whole one of his books. They're quite intense. Was The Trap. They're very weighty books. When I had Children of the Matrix was pretty weighty, and they do go into quite depth on topics. But what David Icke was saying, like when he was in interview with Terry Wogan, he was saying like I'm the part of the Godhead or something, and that's no big deal, sort of who isn't, you become self-aware and you go, I'm part of something greater than myself. So I think that was all set up. They wanted somebody high profile or high flying person, I mean by high flying is he had high aspirations, like spiritual aspirations,
and totally accepted by your average sports
Well, that's it. Yeah, he was like on the BBC. I think he did the
Football.
and
soccer.
Yeah, he was a footballer.
And you're that's your norm. That's the most normie audience. That's the
That's
normie
it, yeah.
of the normie. Yeah.
Yeah. So you meet down the pub, a celebrity you'd meet down the pub, sort of thing.
Right.
And to have him sort of like wig out how you want to describe it.
Say earthquakes are coming and you better wear turquoise, I mean.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And sort of like who do you think you are, the Messiah or something? Don't you watch Monty Python? So he probably he set himself up or was set up for ridicule on that point, but he does talk about that a lot, and it's like, okay, well, that was part of his life, but yeah, some people won't let go about that. There's so much more about him, and it was nothing really shocking what he was saying anyway. Nothing, if you actually research this stuff and looked into this stuff yourself. I mean, maybe for me the most shocking thing was the environmentalism, because that all goes into humans are the enemy and we got to save Mother Earth and depopulate the planet. That's what Greenpeace, that's what Greenpeace leads to. But fortunately, he didn't stay on that ship till the end. He jumped off.
Mythoclass gets it.
I don't understand that mindset from people. I would rather humans live their time on Earth as well as we can, and if we go extinct because we put some shit,
that's not well as we can. That's a counter. No, it's not as well as we can. You just proved yourself just now. If we lived as well as we could, you wouldn't die out. What you're talking about is a masturbatory, existential.
I'm talking about everybody lives at a really high level of decadence in the last couple of generations, kind of.
And that's crap. Yeah. And that's crap.
No,
that's
every species does that.
You don't know very many rich people. They're not happy. There's
I don't give a fuck what rich people think.
All the rich people you know are miserable. Remember that.
I know that for a fact. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I want to
I don't want to be rich or famous. Fuck that bullshit.
But speaking of which, make my friend Sean Morris rich and famous. Go to seanmoore.is.com. He's a software engineer from New York with a passion for the
read the
web.
URL right. Oh my god, I need to change that.
Is that wrong? Sean Moore.
That's correct. You just can't pronounce it. It's almost impossible to pronounce. Yeah, because my name is Sean Morris, but you just put the dot before the I.
Yeah, but because Israel. But Sean Morris, I like it. And
Iceland.
Oh, is it Iceland?
Yes.
Wait. Dot is
I pay Iceland $100 a year for that because I'm not a citizen.
Really? Okay, well now
Yes.
now that just destroyed my whole Zionist conspiracy about you. So good for you. Go to GitHub though, because Sean Morris on GitHub. If you want to download some cool stuff and see some games he's working on, I'm going to set up a link on my website that's going to be xirtus.com/Sean or something, so we can access some of his games. Because one of the things I love about Sean, aside from being a foul-mouthed friend of mine, is that he makes some of the most fun Sonic the Hedgehog games I've ever played, and I'm a Sonic and the Hedgehog kind of fanatic myself. I thought of myself as a fanatic until I met Sean. Now Sean making actual Sonic games, you beat me. But I love what you do. So I want everyone to have access to your games. The other thing I was going to do is
recently created something called PHP WASM or PHP WebAssembly, which takes PHP language and puts it right in the browser. If you click on that, you can find a link to it on the right side of the page. Scroll to the top, very top on the right. There. That's the documentation for it.
We're gonna have to explain this on a deeper level to people who don't understand why PHP is so much sexier than your basic HTML. But I live for PHP now. I already thought it was cool, but I thought it was a little brutalist before, and then Sean he converted me back. It's just so much better. Everything I'm doing is in PHP now, and yeah, you're cool. The fact that you have a full bridge to JavaScript code, nobody understands how important this is. Sorry.
Yeah, and Drupal and WordPress are both using it, so it's pretty serious software at this point. It's not just some bullshit. Check it out.
Also, there's a guy I know, and his name is Maggot. John Henry Mills Warrington, who is musing all over the internet with all sorts of things. If you go to his X page, you can find his Facebook, but you can also find his Blogspot, and a classic Blogspot it is, with links to everything. He's actually gotten, I didn't even know you got to 2011, but I would say 2016, you can start to find a lot of the stuff that he puts. He's got a VK page, Discord channel, meme generator, all sorts of stuff. John is a polite British man, but if you put a sword in his hand, he will defend you. So keep him around. You know what I'm saying? We love you. Thank you for being here. We should definitely also do a thing where we go through some of the magotry. I feel like we should actually just do like a full magotry episode. If you're interested, I'd love to do that sometime.
Yeah. That's fine. I haven't updated that blog page in years, literally. But
my blog spot's kind of outdated as well, but you know.
Yeah, I tend to do private messages and stuff like that now. I mean, I could always like just dump it onto a blog thing, come on, like 500.
Oh, Andreas, if you want to start a new blog, if you want to like work together, I want to take the software that I use to generate the documentation for PHP WebAssembly and see if I can use that to generate blogs.
You're all figuring out what the plan is right now just by hearing Sean say that. But yes, it's coming, and Chris will be involved. Early birds. Let's close it out.
All right, sounds like a plan.
Thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate you.
All right, man.
Sean, you're a foul-mouthed friend. John, you're a gentleman and a scholar. Love you all.